And essentially, the 3 generations thereafter, my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, they were born and raised in Israel, the state of Israel, only have Israeli citizenship, and that is all they know. That includes my mum.
Yeah.
And my brother was born there as well, but it's my dad married my mum, my brother was born there, then they moved here and I was born there. And so we are the only, no, of course.
You do it.
Yes, thank you. So for a lot of the time, we were we were, for most of the...
You know what, that might drop. I'll show you how to do it. I could see you struggling. You know what you do? Just pull this hair. That will lift that up.
Thank you so much. So, there we go. Okay. So for a lot of time, most of that we were the only ones in the family with dual citizenship on my mum's side. Very recently, one of my cousins got married, and now he also has Danish citizenship as well, I believe. But for 3 generations, only Israeli citizenship. And I grew up in this system as a Jewish British Israeli, where I was raised within both the Jewish diaspora narrative and the Israeli narrative. We traveled to Israel since before I could talk, and we have history of going there a lot. So growing up, I was raised with this extremely specific narrative, a very pinhole view of what has happened and what is going on, and how essentially due to fear, we need this place, we have to have this place, we have nowhere else to go, and it's them or us. It's very much seen as a black and white situation. And as I was growing up, I began to start to question these what was seen as facts for me growing up, and it has slowly over time, it's a very slow process, learning to unlearn a lot of things that have been taught to me, but also to come to terms with the fact that this is part of my history, but this isn't something I agree with, this isn't something I side with. And I have come to the point, and I'm fortunate enough that even though my parents may disagree with me in a lot of things, we do have these conversations at home, and I'm allowed to have these conversations and to have these opinions expressed here, where I would very strongly now call myself an anti-Zionist, and I do not believe that the state of Israel is the answer, nor is it something that should be maintained from its inception. It put Jews first above all else, thereby displacing Palestinians, and the more I looked into it, the more I could see that there was a systematic oppression, systematic racism as well, and the treatment, and also absolute censorship within Israel that they try to also extend within the diaspora. And
how do you think they do it in the diaspora?
Okay, so this is very much through...
I don't want to take you off your train of thought. So
no, that's absolutely fine, and I really appreciate that. So how it sort of occurs in the diaspora, and diaspora internationally, all over the world, anywhere where there is a cluster of Jewish population in the area. So typically you have Jewish school systems. So for example, I went to Jewish schools. I went to my local Jewish school. I went from pre-primary to primary to secondary. And throughout there is a really strong, of course you have the pride of being Jewish, and you have that to learn about the history and the story of the Torah and how that feeds into how we practice it today. But there is also an overlapping of Israeli nationalism. And this is over 3 generations worth of practicing, of fine-tuning this art, where it's to grow up in this system is to also praise Israel for what it is, as to being a safe place and for where we truly belong, and maybe one day we'll go and return there. And it's essentially the narrative has gotten to the point where to be Jewish is to support Israel. And that is the blanket statement that a lot of people outside of the diaspora and outside of the Israeli circles assume and see. And it is very much at least until recent history, the majority of the case. However, what we're starting to see, especially with current like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and it's starting to grow, there is discourse within the communities as people are really starting to question the narratives that have been set upon us since birth. And we're seeing very much now that a lot of what we've been told as fact, as being raised in fear and fear being used to justify what is currently the state of Israel and the continued existence of the state of Israel. It's based on misconstruction, it's based on misleading, avoidance. There's a very much a sort of protective sphere of because we believe that we're constantly, currently, presently being persecuted from a historic context as well, that sort of feeds into it always being scared now, to the point where, I mean, just as an example, I had an argument that literally got to the point of shouting over just wearing this in public, just wearing the Star of David outside, because my parents were convinced that at one point or another, me wearing this, I would get attacked in some form. That is a great example of how the fear has been imbued in these circles.
Have you had any comments about wearing that Speaker's Corner today?
No. Okay. And I'll make it very clear. I also I went to my first in-person pro-Palestinian rally as well. I was in the Jewish bloc. Say hi to us if you're there. And it was one of the most genuinely, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, one of the most loving, warm and embracing sort of moments of everyone just knowing that we're united in this cause against what Israel is doing and what the state is doing and what it historically has done and continues to do and attempts to want to do in the future. And we need to work into preventing that now, very much so. And I would say actually this was very much the starting point for me to really start to question things, because up until that point, for a lot of Jews, to be fair, we're not even told really about the Nakba. We're not even told about the Green Line. That's not something that is present in the conversation. So we are naive.
So the people that don't know what the Green Line is?
Fair enough. So the Green Line is what is currently establishes the current state of Israel with where the Gaza Strip is, the West Bank is, Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem got annexed in '67, but this is basically the border of where the state of Israel ends and the stateless begins, let's say. And you have Israelis that have no idea what the Green Line is, and they're in settlements and they don't even realize they're in it. It's a very great example of how much the censorship works there. And that's due to a variety of reasons as well, because so for a lot of articles out there that are talking about what is happening to civilians in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, or the abuse that goes on in the West Bank, or also the abuse that goes on in East Jerusalem, annexed, but it's still very much a secondary citizenship kind of attitude. A lot of these articles are written in English, and English is absolutely a language that is present in Israel. It's typically a secondary language to people, but people aren't extremely fluent in it, and so not having articles in Hebrew for them to read, to absorb, especially at a young age, makes it separates them from access to the narrative of what the government is imbuing upon them. Right. On top of that, there is, and you see this in the diaspora as well, there is a really strong sense of, because the fear is so strong and it's them or us mentality is so present, you create a knee-jerk reaction of, when you are hit with facts, to just immediately deny it because your trust to the state is so true and is so present. And to question it, you face intense social stigma, and you face it incredibly so in Israel, but you also face it in the diaspora as well. And so, like, if you went to if you went to a local synagogue, because remember, to be pro-Palestine within the Jewish community is not stuck with this. It's not directly related to a specific level of religiousness. So you know, you have different shuls for different levels of religiousness, which represents different levels of the community, for different parts of the community. It is an absolute mess of opinions in every single level, from Hasidic to liberal. You have people that are having tensions in their local communities of where they stand and where their opinions are, and and another thing we've got to be aware of as well is freedom of expression and freedom of press in Israel. So on top of social attitudes, if people are to get together to have a protest, I remember post-October 7th, and forgive me for not being able to talk about the facts specifically, they've come off my mind. But one of the very first anti-war protests in Israel that occurred required a Supreme Court approval, where it was the civilians trying to organize this protest against the police, which is effectively the state. It's against the state as well. So, and what you can see multiple times is these blockades of skewing of the law to prevent people that want to get their voices heard against the social sort of default to try and get their voices heard, and then it's stopped by the police. There were some really fascinating videos actually of specifically on Instagram. It's All That's Left and the Radical Bloc Tel Aviv. Those are two great examples of seeing protests that are occurring that are anti-Netanyahu, anti-war, and pro-Palestine in its nature, where in the middle of their protest you have citizens, other civilians, Israeli, who are just in absolute denial of the level of atrocities that are occurring to civilians there, because frankly speaking, it's not shown on the news, and I can vouch for that. At home, we have the N12 News. The N12 News. It's one of the Israeli channels. It's one of the main one, isn't it? Yeah, it's one of the popular ones. And post-October 7th, it was a great example of seeing how the narrative was only focused on the hostages, which is, I understand covering of the hostages. We are concerned about returning civilians to their families and making sure everyone is safe and no one gets harmed. Yeah. But the narrative was only focused on the hostages. There was no mention of civilian distraught within the Gaza Strip, of what was actually happening to the people there. It is generalized, and the narrative is created that everyone there is part of Hamas one way or another, and it's this dehumanization and vilifying that occurs, whether they're aware of it or not. And a lot of the times they're not even really aware of it because they don't hear the other narrative. They don't necessarily have access. The resources are there, but first of all, they're in English, like I said before, so it makes it more difficult to reach out, and you need to actively pursue it. There is censorship that very much goes on, and the shutting down of Al Jazeera is a prime example of how Israel lost one of the really great journalistic news sources to have direct access. We have one of the Haaretz journalists said on record how it was a disaster that Al Jazeera got shut down in Israel, because for them, Israeli journalists, it was their source of information to what was really going on inside the Gaza Strip that wasn't filtered through what the IDF was telling them. And it's really a manufactured result from the inception of the country and quickly establishing laws that put 48ers, that is Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, within the undisputed state of Israel, that have them be at a disadvantage to Jewish Israelis, and the effects that it's happening, again, Golan Heights, Gaza Bank, Gaza Strip, West Bank, and East Jerusalem as well. It's just consistent mistreatment and supremacy of Judaism that is there as a Jewish state. And that sort of led me to the decision that a lot of Jews are starting to see themselves, including in Israel as well, that just the current treatment is not the answer. It's not right. It's not the solution. It's not the long-term solution. It's not the short-term solution. And to create a place where equal rights and just equal humanity. This is very basic stuff that if you speak to certain Israelis about it, or certain Jews about this as well, and even those who aren't, but are in the Zionist headspace, speak to any Zionist about this. When you give them certain facts like how Israel has illegally used white phosphorus, which is a banned substance within the Gaza Strip during the October 7th and historically, and it's a war crime that they've done so, and that the Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have shown this to be the case, their knee-jerk reaction is to deny.
So just for the crowd, the white phosphorus is something that when you drop it, it literally melts the skin.
And burns to the bone, burns past the bone. And what's also tragic about it as well is that even if you survive these excruciating burns, you get cancer in the long term. So you're plagued with the effects of white phosphorus as soon as it comes in contact.
Wow.
And specifically, it's important to note that they were using it in highly densely populated civilian areas, which is another war crime on top of the war crime of using it in the first place. And so the denial of of these facts is also stemmed from, so I've said this many times about the language barrier, but also in the diaspora and in Israel, you get raised to essentially, and I remember being told this multiple times, don't trust what Amnesty International says, the UN isn't on our side, Human Rights Watch isn't on our side. And, you know, as someone who is anti-Zionist and has like sort of deprogrammed myself from a lot of this sounds insane. It's absolutely ridiculous. These are humanitarian, non-profit organizations, and and you really you have so much blind faith because you've been told your entire life that you have nowhere else. You only have this land. And you don't even have access to the option, to the idea of coming to the notion of treating Palestinians equally. And it's insane. It's absolute insanity. And you don't realize it's insane until you've come out of it. And then you get this frustrating situation where you try and speak to people about it who are still in the depths of being the Zionistic system that they were raised in, to absolutely deny what's going on. And I would that's all right. I would absolutely say that the Zionistic system within Judaism is very much a programmed approach, and the deprogramming takes a very long time. And it's really interesting actually, because when you go to the Jewish bloc of these pro-Palestine rallies, you have people like me who are anti-Israel, anti-Zionist. You have also people that are anti-Zionist, but they're not quite where I am on the spectrum, where they're still in the process of deprogramming, I would say, where they believe that maybe a two-state solution is the way to go. It's clinging on to the fact that Israel is part of their identity and they have to let go of that. And remember, I'm someone that has 3 generations. This was not an easy process to let go, to separate, and to relearn a lot of what was taught to us, and that was frankly untrue and misconstrued and racist and however other many words. And when it comes to people that were raised in this process, I would definitely say as well, again, we're going on a tangent a bit, but I would definitely say that it's absolutely, people can unlearn and relearn what Zionism really is and what it truly stands for, and how nationalistic and racist this approach is. And it is absolutely possible, I'm proof of that. It takes time, it really does, and there's a lot of levels of acceptance that needs to go, of coming to terms that you are on the side of history that has contributed to this, that has over multiple generations played a part in establishing and maintaining the current status quo. And you need to actively want to look for the truth and to be honest with yourself and to face the facts. And it's something that takes time, but it's absolutely possible. So I would say that even citizens of Israel currently, including specifically Jewish citizens, we are already seeing that a lot of them are starting to wake up. Well, a minority is starting to wake up. But forgive me for being optimistic. I am optimistic that that voice can grow and that we can start to really question the lack of freedom of speech and freedom of press that is currently happening in the state. So, absolutely.
So the reason why I just let you speak, because
I appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't think what I would have said would have been any beneficial than what you were saying, frankly. You covered everything very nicely, and it's a point of view and a perspective that we're in desperate and dire need of. And for me to just unnecessarily be jumping in, I think would have been an injustice to what you were saying, because frankly, that was a breath of fresh air, and we'll continue kind of. I'll hit you back with some questions, but I think it's important for people to realize that when it comes to these discussions, speak when you need to speak. Otherwise, if someone else is speaking sense, it doesn't matter who it is, you let them speak. And there were a lot of things that you mentioned. I think it was very fascinating, especially your view of how the lack of education is being proliferated in certain kind of places, in certain communities.
It's selected history.
Yes.
And it's very biased, and it's done with intent. Whether the people in the system are aware of it or not, it is very much so a result of both lobbying within Israel and lobbying within the diaspora by pro-Israeli movements. And it's how a lot of Jewish schools around the world follow this narrative. Shuls do as well. Jewish newspapers go into it as well. And it's really important both within these circles and for people outside of these circles to be aware that there are Jews and there are people with Israeli citizenship that are questioning and going actively against what this narrative is, and that these voices are present, and we're really trying to grow these voices, and we're really trying to make it clear that we disagree with this wholeheartedly. It's not the answer, it's not what we're looking for, and it's not the solution to, forgive me for being cheesy, but it's not the solution for peace in the Middle East. So, yeah.
Are you not worried about, say, your safety or how your own community is going to see you? What has been their reaction to you?
Okay.
Because a lot of people are kind of afraid of going against the narrative of their own community.
Absolutely. And that is definitely one of the stigmas that for anyone who is starting to ask these questions themselves in these communities, that's one of the first things you face. Because when you first start to have these opinions, it feels incredibly isolating. You feel like you're the only one, and there's no one else out there. And thank Instagram, because there is much proof in multiple places, including in the UK, Na'amod. If you're not aware, if there are any diasporan British Jews listening, Na'amod UK, take a look at them. They're doing phenomenal work. They are an anti-apartheid pro-peace movement in the UK that is attempting to lobby against Britain's actions towards supporting Israel and war.
Fantastic. Big up Na'amod.
Yes, Na'amod UK. They're doing phenomenal work. I will preach about them till the cows come home. Yes, stigma in social circles. So personally, I have, for lack of a better term, I've come out to my family about these opinions, specifically to my parents and my brother and his fiance. They are aware, and to different levels they disagree with me. But I am very thankful that my dad specifically has allowed me to have these conversations at home, to express my opinion and to explore these viewpoints. It helped me form the opinion that I currently have. Even if he does disagree with it, he very much respects my opinion, and I'm very thankful that he let me have that space, even if he doesn't agree with me. With regards to the outer Jewish sphere, I would say that I'm not currently a member of a synagogue locally or anything like that.
It's like the point that you mentioned, that because you class yourself as an anti-Zionist, naturally that's going to be attached with the label of anti-Semitic. Yeah. Have you got those labels thrown at you?
Not yet. Oh no, I think I think my brother may have chucked something. I can't
There
remember.
it is.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But what's really important, the Zionists that are saying that it's anti-Semitic, the kind of thoughts that I have, are once again fulfilling the systematic narrative of melding being Jewish with the state of Israel.
Exactly.
And we need to separate it. And a lot of people are really starting to do that narrative. You're seeing it in encampments in America and even in England here. And you're seeing it internationally with all the movements that I talked about as well, including in Israel as well. They're trying to separate. They're trying to start the process of separating it. It's a little more nuanced, though, I would say. I will say my Israeli family isn't aware. I haven't specifically stated these opinions. I would say that even my family in England here aren't necessarily, they're aware I'm not sympathetic to the Israeli cause. They not necessarily aware I'm to the point of being anti-Israel. Which is a very interesting opinion to have as someone, to them, it's a very interesting opinion that I have as someone with family that is with Israeli citizenship as well. But I stand by what I believe in, and I believe in the humanity comes first. So
you're still part of the Jewish faith?
I am. I don't just wear this for show. I do consider myself Jewish, and I consider myself, this was very much this whole process of understanding my Israeli history and my sort of where it came from, and separating it from my Judaism helped me be more proud and more loud, let's say, of being Jewish, with regards to just wearing this in public. I make sure to wear this outside to continuously prove that, you know, the world's not out to get us. We're not going to get attacked. I'd like to think we're not going to get attacked on the street. And yeah, exactly. And I've proven this to be the case for long enough now that this idea of, it's more about the idea of fearing, the idea of being feared than actually being hated. The idea of being hated than actually being hated. So it's just, especially with Ashkenazi Jews, there is a very strong history of mistreatment, displacement, resettlement, and pogroms and such. And with both sides of my family being Ashkenazi Jews, there is a very strong narrative that got fueled into the Zionistic movement, because Zionism, when it was created, was within the European area, I believe. And this sort of colonialism attitude was inherited by sort of the British attitudes that were happening at the time, and it created this, like, what was seen as this is the only solution to bulldoze whatever's already there, rewrite the narrative in history that there was no one there, it was barely present, we made the lands green, or however the statement went. And it was, and to the point as well, I think this is very important to mention, it is the Nakba's not only the Nakba's not covered in the diaspora, it's also not covered in Israel, but it's also within I think it's also like looked negatively on if Arabs are to mention Arabs within these territories are to mention anything with relation to the Nakba. It could hinder them getting Israeli citizenship, even if they don't agree with the state of Israel. Israeli citizenship is needed, first of all, to vote for the lands that they're under, but also to get access to work and access to borders into these territories. So that's one of the reasons that they would be applying for citizenship and are applying for citizenship. The Israeli Ministry of Immigration and such purposefully delay and prolong these applications, with East Jerusalem being a really prime example. Only 5%, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is correct, only 5% of Arabs in East Jerusalem, which has been annexed in 1967. They are under the state of Israel. They have the right to apply for Israeli citizenship. Only 5% have been accepted since the inception of since the annexing in 67, which is ridiculous. And when you look at even recent history from, like, I want to say mid-2010s to 2021, only 36 applications that over this period of time got accepted. and you have a wide variety of reasons. You need to not, and it's some of, let me just say the reasons are stupid. You've got, if you failed your Hebrew proficiency test, that's going to be a negative. If you have posted in social media the Palestinian flag or said anything with regards to the Nakba or any form of sympathy to the situation, you'll get dismissed. Absolutely, this feeds into the censorship situation. Yeah. You also have, and it gets really horrendous because you get these really vague statements of unsupportive to the state's cause or something like that. That's not the exact wording, but there is incredibly vague wording which then gets used to then reject or delay applications with almost no real reason, a lot of the time as well, and it's just really horrific to see. This is a great example of how the Zionist state is supposedly, these people should have right to this citizenship and be treated as equals, and they're not. And even 48ers aren't being treated as equal as well, with 10 key discriminatory laws that are present, from an Arab who is a member of Knesset can be discharged from being a member of the parliament, the Knesset, if the majority think that their opinions are too extreme or too violent. Funny how that law wouldn't extend now to the current situation in the Knesset, where you've got some real crazy people saying some really horrific stuff, but it specifies Arabs, which again, that is just racist and just an absolute horrendous standpoint. You also have laws that create a situation where, when new towns are being built within the state of Israel, first of all, the funding towards the development of these towns, the government, there is a law that says the government can decide where funding is allocated. So if a town is going to be majority Arab, they are likely to, it gets construed so that they receive less funding, and then Jewish exclusive states get construed to get more funding. And then when these settlements are, when these towns, settlements are in the West Bank, yes, but towns within the Israeli states, for specifying, I just want to use the correct wording, sorry.
That's fine.
When these towns are built and the local community decides who comes in, there is another law that pairs very nicely with the previous law I just mentioned. I say this like it's horrendous, but like, you know, it pairs with it of you can decide who comes into, who is access and can come live in this town, based on, again, a very vague and broad statement is said. It's like, that is like, meets your standards or something like that. And that essentially gets practiced in the way that Jewish Israelis are allowed, and then Arab Israelis, Palestinians with Israeli citizenship are rejected. These 48ers get rejected. And so you have, I'm specifically talking about the state of Israel. These are 48ers experience, what 48ers can experience within the state of Israel. And so what in the
gets too much.
I wouldn't mind moving.
Yeah,
if that's
fine.
all right.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
What are you guys here today to talk about?
I'm talking today about
what's going on in Israel, Palestine.
Yeah. Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
You know what? It's gone.
Is this your camera?
He's not. It's fine. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
No, over there, that's our cycle lane. No?
No worries. I'll let it down. There you go. Oh,
She's bringing
sorry.
your cameras.
Okay, thank you.
I was looking up for you because the song was good.
Yeah, I was starting to feel it. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay.
And plus, be careful. You know, when you're pointing it to the door, you're going to see a lot of fitna there, and then blurring and all that becomes a nightmare. So be cautious about that. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Where were we?
You were talking about the 48ers.
Yes. Yeah. So because of those two laws, just as an example of settlements living spaces, and a reality is created in the long term where you get Jewish towns that have a very stable and sustainable amount of funding, are very much like well established and well funded, and access to greater resources. The kids in these areas have access to greater resources. And then in these Arab towns, they had less funding from the establishment, so resources of what is available within the community are much more strained and limited, which then affects the access to opportunities and work and such in the area. And that means that these children grow up with a much more difficult access to these opportunities and such. So it really is a great example of how it's systemic in nature within the state of Israel itself. And yeah, so that's just a great example. And there are other laws as well that set examples, from the lack of a right to return to service in the army, to just whether you can have dual citizenship or not. There is a real double standard of Jews being allowed dual citizenship, me being a great example, and then people in East Jerusalem, for example, if they have Jordanian citizenship, or people in the West Bank have Jordanian citizenship, they cannot apply for Israeli citizenship without removing their citizenship from Jordan. And that is an incredibly difficult thing to do, to put yourself in for the queue of maybe getting it, so that maybe you could get some more work opportunities and get access to just more opportunities, because yes, like they don't agree. A lot of people in these areas don't agree with Israel, but this, and unfortunately for them, this this Israeli state is the place where they have access to work, access to a salary, and that's even the same in the West Bank, which is such a can of worms with regards to the border detailing, about how, yes, we have hundreds of border controls in the West Bank, but in the Gaza Strip, you've got people queuing up from like 4 a.m. just to try and get to work at 8 or 9, and then they have to get back within a certain point, within a certain time, to the border and be registered that they have returned, or they will risk losing their right to enter into work.
That's the question. Sorry to interrupt. Do you support a two-state solution, one-state solution? My personal opinion is that I believe, considering what Israel as a Jewish state has been founded on, and from how it's from the get-go oppressed and placed its Jewish citizens first, I completely disagree with that approach. It's not an equal approach and never will be. And the result of the current government is kind of not really a surprise when you see how it was founded. And so I personally believe that I need to get the order right. One state that is secular and democratic, I think is the best approach. And specifically, Palestinians must get a right of return, get rid of that 1950s law. And this may be grey territory, but this is my opinion, that people such as my family, who only have Israeli citizenship, it's the only land they know, it's the only land they've ever been on, I think they should have a right to remain in this Palestine state as well. What if they were living in the house of somebody who was kicked out?
Then I definitely think that we need to, when it comes to those kinds of situations, I think we need to hold everyone that has practiced in these misdeeds accountable. They need to be taken to court, they need to be tried. I think perhaps there are people there that have dual citizenship, and perhaps in those cases maybe they can get a visa, and if they want to, maybe apply for citizenship, but they won't get citizenship by default. Palestinians, I think, should have the right to apply for citizenship by default, because they were displaced by this state. And that's, broadly speaking, where my opinions lie with that.
From what I understand, most
most Palestinians and most Jewish Israelis in opinion polls, they don't support a two-state solution. They reject it.
Yes.
By quite a good majority.
Yes.
And not only that, I would love to see one single democratic state as well, but do you not think that might create some sort of gigantic civil war? Because a lot of Palestinians and Israelis wouldn't support that. They'd be
of course.
They'd be willing to go into violence.
Okay, yeah, let's go down this route.
Ideally, I don't want to see like an ethno-state, like a Jewish ethno-state or an Islamic state, but it might be the most. The whole international community supports two-state solution. It might be the most realistic, right, for now.
No, but I would say a two-state solution is people that have not lived in the country, as the poll you stated suggests. It's from people that aren't experiencing what's going on. I would argue.
The poll was done of Israelis living in Israel and Palestinians.
Yes. So, but they disagree with a two-state, right?
Right. Okay.
Yes. So what I'm saying is the narrative outside of this land that the two-state is the only solution. That's a misconstruction. I would argue that what can be seen in the West Bank, where you've got areas A, B, and C, IDF militant force overseeing justice and stability in the area, I would argue that this is kind of a proto example of what a two-state solution would be, and my goodness, does it fail. Because not only is there no true independent government there, Israel would never relinquish that control because they fear the consequences of their actions.
Demographically, if they had a one single state, there'd be a majority Palestinian Arabs, right? And there's a sort of many on the Zionist right, they're quite concerned about the population.
and that is a perfect example of, like I said before, of how this feeds into the fear of it's them or us. We must fight for what we have, and for a lot of people there as well, it's like I'm okay to not think about it because I'm in the fortunate position of being on the side of the oppressor, not the oppressed. It's one of the things that really needs to be challenged. First of all, that narrative that Israelis are raised in needs to be challenged, and the re-education and a real apparent of facts needs to be stated. And number two, and this might suck, them realizing this and getting to the point where you've got to learn to trust. And like, if there is no trust that this other side will treat you humanely, how on earth do you think you're going to even get a two-state solution? You know?
Yeah, because right now the Likud party, they don't want it either.
Arabs are not interested in two states.
Yeah, neither is the Likud party. They don't want it either.
They would have been willing.
By all means.
Netanyahu's made it clear.
Ariel Sharon pulled out of Gaza.
I always get confused when there's multiple voices.
Do you support boycott, divestment, sanctions movement?
Yes.
Can I ask, because I'm much more sympathetic to your viewpoint, but on this, do you not think it's a bit hypocritical? Because, for example, the United Kingdom went into Iraq. According to Lancet, very prestigious medical journal, about 1 million Iraqis dead because of that war. Right? That's not just a random figure. That's like very respected. So Britain has done far more damage than Israel did in the last.
To compare is not to justify. I would say to compare is not to justify.
Why would say boycotting United Kingdom and boycotting Israel? But I never hear talk about boycotting Egypt, United Kingdom, Britain, United States. They've done a lot of
so I will argue that currently. Yes. Okay, but I would, and that's fair enough as well. And these are perfect points of boycotting that I'm certain.
But just as a response to that, people have been boycotting China. They have been boycotting Denmark. They have been boycotting America. Boycotting it's a movement.
I'd like to, and I'd also like to add as well that, first of all, for me, contextually, as someone who is Jewish, British, and Israeli with the passports, this is a personal matter to me that I want to affect and contribute to affecting to. But in the grander scheme of things, currently, right now, presently, a genocide is going on, and the collective unification of those that are pro-Palestinian in boycotting. As a singular person, that action may not be major, but as a collective, it has a significant economic effect, especially with Israel being a startup nation. Like, they thrive economically in creating startups, especially in the tech industry. So boycotting that's all right. So boycotting all of these systems, boycotting the trade and the resources that come in and out, and the sources and the companies that are based there as well, sets a very clear message and a very clear pressure to our governmental officials here to start to do the right thing humanitarily.
Because there is no genocide, so you've actually achieved it.
Okay, let's just finish our thing. I mean, that is just...
Sorry, that's a can of worms.
We're not interested in people that can't accept genocide for genocide. You can have that conversation later. You can have that conversation later. So we're just gonna... We'll just round off our conversation, which went over for about an hour, and there was, I mean, you gave your time and you made some fantastic points that I think are very helpful for the discussion. Points like that aren't, and you can have that discussion later. You can have that discussion later on. You can have that discussion later on.
I would say this is a very prime example of a Zionist
and what you're doing is, you know what you're doing?
Which is very much staunch,
I mean, Tony, you
and set, and there is a knee-jerk reaction. There is a protective nature, and it's very much a result of 3 generations of people being raised in this narrative, which has gotten to being it's them or us, and this is a very good example of that, I would say.
Yeah, you know what? That's such a very good point. That's actually that's illustrated your point incredibly well, and because of the mashallah, how the depth, and I'm sure a lot of people watching probably didn't know this, and it is a message of hope, and we don't want to contaminate it with these sorts of conversations that happen here, you know, every other week. Thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question? So sorry to...
Yeah.
What do you think of the recent poll done of Muslims in the UK saying 46% support Hamas, and about a quarter of... Only about, I think, a quarter of Muslims agree that on October 7th there was rape and murder of people. Do you think this might be a problem? So there was a poll done by a neutral body. They found out about 46% of UK Muslims support Hamas, and they found out about 25% say that they want any rapes or murders on Hamas.
How can this man say that the civilians are collateral damage?
This guy is a clown.
Thousands and thousands of people.
He's a clown. We don't have time for clowns.
That's what helped create Hamas.
Put them here.
Israeli journalists.
They're just there to trigger.
How would you explain that the Jews saying really strong? Are you going to say there's some people Jews and anti-Semitic? Doesn't make any sense.
This could be interesting.
Can I tell you where I was born?
Come on.
I'm 4 months older than Israel.
And I love the name as well. What a legend. MashaAllah. Yeah, it was mostly me listening.
Which is good. Just to keep back a little bit.
I have managed to have sex.
Maybe next time. Because it's good to have juxtaposition.
There are, but that conversation was so good, and he was taking us all the way back to square one.
The genocide thing.
You know, when you're questioning everything, it's not genocide. It's not even like Netanyahu himself admitted. You know what? It's within our national interest to provoke Hamas. He said this in the good. I mean, to start pulling out these references, it's just going to undo this. So it's better.
I think it's
undo this. It was too good.
But maybe in the future another one. Because I'd like because it's something if we one state. I'm in a two-state. I think we could say some useful things.
You said they don't want these things.
Sorry?
They don't want it. I mean, I prefer one state, a Palestinian state.
But I want what's fair for everyone. What's fair is and I think
How would you call it a fair when you invite me to your house, you have a fight, and you have an external third party comes out and says, look, I'm going to divide the house. How does that make any sense?
I'll leave you to it,
Yeah, very nice. Next time, do you understand? So you get South Park.
I will. Send me the episode and the season number.
I'll send you the link. South Park.
What's the name? How?
T-A-L. Okay. Next I take your point, but my point is, if that happened now, but this happened 75 years ago, and I want to see him time different times, the argument Again, it's real hard to just consider the whole package. I wouldn't support it. I think a bunch of immigrants came in a land grab, albeit traumatised and also facilitated by the British Empire, went, hey, you can have it, right? So it's even complex there, but nonetheless, supported in that 75 years, 80 years later, most of the people responsible for that part again, and it shows inherited the problem. I don't think the Greens got a little more
So what you're saying is, I'm not saying the West should dictate. I don't think the West should dictate. What I'm not saying is, I think we need international law. I like that will work for all people fairly. MashaAllah, brilliant podcast. I like the casting. I'm from Newbury, which is next to Reading, so that's like a million. But anyway, all I'm saying is, just forget it. The worldwide